Yeah, I think, just knowing those properties, I guess, like, okay, I'm buying a thermal camera. It's for inspection, of course,
Yeah,
or
you
if
know
I'm
what?
buying,
You're not going to
yeah,
go and shoot a feature film with it,
yeah,
unless it's Predator, of
yeah.
course. Then you
There we
could.
go. There you
Damn it,
could,
you could
yeah.
make a whole thermal film all about
Thermal film, yeah.
Predator.
That's gonna be interesting. um, yeah. So exactly. So I think, knowing what camera you buy.
We can. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Alex.
I was
Morning,
going to say
afternoon,
it is
midday,
afternoon,
midday,
midday, halfway through the day,
noon.
noon for us here in the UK.
Yeah.
Yeah, here we go again. Week 8. I got it right this time.
Week 8. That's right. So that's 2 months
It's
in
week
now.
8. 2 months of this.
Yeah.
Just us happily chatting away about all things drone.
Yeah.
And we can be a bit more relaxed this week because last week, which hasn't gone out yet, was a bit rushed. We rushed it a bit.
Yeah, we had to. There's so many things coming on, and
we had stuff going on, so we had to give it a bit of a rush.
So. Yeah. Not that we're not rushed this week either, but
no, we could be here for hours.
Well,
if
we can't really be here for hours, but
no, we'll do our standard half hour, 40 minutes, whatever it takes. Whatever it takes to discuss. See, I segued there.
Mm-hmm.
Drone mapping versus inspection. What's the difference?
Yeah. So
got a fly in here.
Oh no. They want to join in on the pod.
They do. They want to be part of the podcast.
Right. So mapping versus inspection, what's the difference?
Yes.
So that's an interesting topic because I think our industry is such a niche, new industry, niche but growing really fast and with an enormous amount of potential, that there is no standardization of lingo or kind of definitions or terms. So I think a lot of people use different words interchangeably. And I think mapping and inspection are those two words that if you're in the industry for a while, you probably have a good idea for them.
But or you're in, or you do what we do, where you've got a definition between mapping and inspection. But for those people that go, what is the difference between mapping and inspection? Today, we will tell you.
Yeah.
Or we will do our best to tell you. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Well, at least our definition for it, and then people might have their own definitions, which they're welcome to, put in the chat box.
People can make their own minds up. This is this is Hammer's definition of what the difference is between mapping and inspection.
Yeah. So let's start with why know the difference. So why do you think it's important to even kind of define these things?
It's important to know what you're capturing for a high quality output. So it all depends kind of what your end goal is. What have you set out to do? Have you set out to inspect or map?
Yeah.
Ooh, and that is the question, isn't it?
That is the question. And if you define that properly, I think, it helps you essentially. The definition helps you follow a process and be process driven and then measure what you're defining. I think it's a very technical industry. So I think that kind of like that definition, whether it's mapping or inspection, what you're doing and what you're capturing, it sort of like allows you to kind of at least have a North Star to sort of shoot towards.
Yeah. And, you're going to have to educate your client or your stakeholder, what the difference is. The stakeholder might say, I need you to inspect this, when actually he means, I need you to map this. You've got to put the definition in. You've got to tell your client or stakeholder or client, depending on which way around you want, what you're going out to achieve and what data you collect, what is represented in that data and what the client or stakeholder is to expect when you bring that data back to them.
Yeah.
There's no point in going out and I know we're going to define what inspection or mapping is. There's no point in going out and doing an inspection when actually they want a 3D map or a 2D map, and you come back and you've got that, you've got that. You're like, oh, here it is. And they go, actually, well, that's not what I wanted, because then you've
Yeah.
wasted your time and you've wasted their time, and they probably won't pay you for it. Or you have to go and do it again.
We have to do it again, which is just,
Nobody wants to do it again.
Nobody wants to do it again. So get it right the first time.
Yes.
So having said that, let's kick things off with mapping. So what do you think mapping is? How do you define mapping?
Mapping is you're basically creating an accurate representation of a something.
Okay.
You know, whether that be, I don't know, whether that be a building site, for example.
Yeah.
You know, the stakeholder or client may want a full-size top-down representation, digital representation of what they're looking to build something on.
Yeah.
Or you may go out and map several fields for future development, or for a farming, whatever you call it,
agriculture.
agricultural mission.
Yeah.
It's mapping is you're collecting information, aren't you?
Yeah.
At the end of the day,
100%. It's basically as from what a map means, which is basically sort of defining where something is or how something is in its current state. It's just basically information with location data attached to it in terms of, what does that site look like? What are the things on the site? What are the heights of different things, as you mentioned, with a building site or an agricultural site? You're just trying to get an accurate understanding of what is on the site today, essentially. And essentially those maps represent information, and information is power when it comes to making those decisions.
Information is power,
and we want to have that power.
We love power.
Yeah.
The human race does love.
So we need to love power.
The human race loves power, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We are power hungry people.
Yeah.
Even if you say you're not, you are. Everyone is.
Everyone is.
Everyone is.
Yeah.
Everyone is always striving for better.
Yeah. So, information is power, and then I guess what it really boils down to is that, mapping is essentially producing a map or a 3D model of an area, because those are the main ways in which we interact with maps today in a non-drone context. Obviously we interact with our world in 3D. We are 3D beings, and we are kind of geared to think of everything in 3D. But maps make it easier as well.
Maps do make it easier, and obviously you've got your 2D map, which is just your top-down, layered, overlapped grid pattern map, and then obviously you've got your 3D map, where photogrammetry comes into play, there's a definition between that. You kind of sort of ordnance survey style map or mapping, which obviously you can do with a drone. You can map vast areas, whether it be with obviously mapping vast areas is easier with a fixed wing as opposed to a rotary. You can do it with a rotary device. You're just going to have to change your battery a lot. Whereas 3D mapping is still mapping, but you are generating a 3D representation of your something.
Yeah.
Whatever that may be. I mean, you can 3D map. You can, and people have 3D map a vast area.
Yeah.
Obviously it's going to take a lot more time, a lot more resource to be able to do that, as opposed to mapping just a 3D mapping just a building, which, we do a lot. We know which building we do that.
We were talking about the same building, aren't we?
We are talking about. Should we mention it today? Do we mention it?
Let's mention it. It deserves a mention in every episode.
It does. The infamous mill.
The infamous mill.
So we kind of went off on a tangent there. So I mean, in some respects, they're very similar and very different. You can have your top-down standard 2D map, which a lot of people, do you find very handy. And then obviously you can take it one step further and get into photogrammetry and have your 3D mapping side of things, where you have a 3D representation of what you've gone to collect.
Yeah, so I think in some sense, because the output is a map or a 3D model, from a drone context, it's really important that the data is collected in a very structured way.
Yes.
Because you can't produce a map or a 3D model without having structure to your data. And by data, we mean images.
Yep.
So typically, as people can probably see from our backgrounds, you've got to collect images in a very structured way where you have grid-based patterns. Every image has an
overlap. Yep.
With other images. And that's used in a process called photogrammetry, which we've made a whole video on. Which we'll probably link somewhere in this video. Somewhere around here. Somewhere around there.
Obviously, we're that, we won't go into that now.
Yeah.
That might give someone a chance to look at one of our older videos or listen to one of our older podcasts.
Yeah.
But so photogrammetry, high overlap, processing, production.
Yeah, those are the keywords for mapping, aren't they?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Basically.
So okay, cool. So again, that's a good starting point for mapping. What about inspection?
Inspection. Well, inspection does basically what it says on the tin. It's understanding the condition of an area or an asset, as opposed to mapping that asset. You want to be able to see what the issue is with it. So let's take the mill for example, because it's always there lingering in the background. I can go and map. I can 3D map the mill, but I could also inspect the mill. So the inspection would be, you're looking for detail. So a broken window, of which it has plenty. Missing tiles, holes in the roof, all of these things are relevant because it has all of them. Chimney stacks that may have fallen over, again, relevant because it's falling apart. You're looking for definitive items or areas that are in need of maybe repair or reconstruction. Hence the reason the word inspection. You're inspecting the site, not mapping the site.
Exactly. Yeah. You're basically trying to identify issues or defects, or any kind of problems with the asset, building, cell tower, whatever, to basically preemptively know if there is anything that will cause trouble in the future, and to essentially start planning for some form of repair plan or some form of at least the end stakeholder probably wants that.
You collect the data as you would with mapping. You collect the data as you would, you take it back, and then that data is represented to your client or your stakeholder to say, here's what we've collected. As you can see, there are issues with said building. There are lots of issues with the mill. But
So
please don't tear it down. Because it's our little gem. Although I think from what I found out, it is grade 2 listed. So even if they did tear it down, because I think they're talking about building apartments there or flats, they would have to reconstruct it as is.
Oh, interesting.
But with apartments or whatever in it.
Right.
Which would be cool in one respect, but not so cool in the other, because it probably means that people certainly won't want a drone buzzing around them, mapping their premises.
We'll have to find Mill 2.0 in that case.
Yeah.
Another building to do mapping and inspection.
Plenty of stuff I can find. It's a shame because there used to be, just down the road from me the other way, there used to be an old mental asylum.
Okay.
But unfortunately, it got torn down and they built houses over it. There's only one bit of it remaining, which I think is the chapel, and the rest's all gone. But there's plenty of places I can find around here.
Plenty of targets. But
targets.
From an inspection point of view, I know it's from a mapping point of view, we said that the important thing is to have structure in the data and to have high overlap, because that's going to get processed later on. So those are some of the things that you're trying to optimize for. But from an inspection point of view, How are the images collected? What are they trying to maximize?
Well, they're trying to maximize coverage and detail. I mean, you might be on site with a surveyor, so to speak, or you might not. But you might go up. I mean, I know from doing inspections previously where I've had some instruction from a surveying company or a surveyor that this is what we think the issue is.
Yeah.
While you're up there, if you see anything else that you think it stands out, please take images of it. Well, I have gone up before. Actually, it was in Richmond, which is not that far away from you.
Right.
In fact, we have driven past it on the way to we've driven past it on the way to go and do some testing. Anyway, that's by the way. I think what had happened was some tiling had come away from the side of a chimney and there was a gap.
Yeah.
But the surveyor didn't know that. He just knew about an ingress of water.
Right.
And when I got the drone up there straight away, if it's obvious, you can collect for it.
Right.
A lot of people will go up and take images of the whole roof, which is what we would suggest to do. But there may be areas where when you're taking those photos where you think, hang on a minute, that doesn't quite look right. I'm going to get some extra shots of that. It's all about quality data collection.
Yeah.
Because again, the last thing you want to do is collect all that data, go, I've done it, take it back to your client or stakeholder, and they go, well, that doesn't look right, but you're not close enough to it. There's not a good angle on it.
Yeah. 100%.
So it's all about quality. Again, quality data rules the day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And quality for inspections, as you said, involves the details, taking maybe spot checking some of the asset for, images in those particular places.
Yeah.
Anything stands out, capture it. So that makes sense. And now I think we have like a good kind of definitions for mapping and inspection. Hopefully people are able to understand, at least from our point of view, how we see mapping and inspection.
Yeah.
One is very much understanding what is on the site, what is the actual representation of the site.
Yep.
And the other one is what are the issues with a specific asset or building or whatever. So that's kind of like a very high level way of putting it. What about outputs? So let's think about drone outputs, so not just drone, but drone data outputs.
Okay.
Ultimately, we are doing the drone industry is trying to get to is a means to an end, which is the data, which is the value.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the drone industry, certainly what we do is trying to integrate with, with outside sources. So CAD software, for example, mapping, you'd want to integrate with CAD. So you'd want to be able to output the information that you've taken or the data that you've collected. 2 seconds. Yeah, I over egged it and spat on my keyboard.
Oh, no.
only a little bit. So
only human.
Only human, exactly. So that data is important, and you'd want to use that data in as many formats as you possibly can. So to be able to output that data into some CAD software would be ideal.
Yeah.
Because that way you can, it translates perfectly over to something that someone else can use. They may not be used to using, software where you can see the 3D image. They may want to input that into something else for, an architect's drawing or some, so that's where it worked best. Would that be an OBJ?
Yeah. That would be an OBJ 3D model. There's also all sorts of other formats, .dxf, .las. And so essentially all of these files integrate with CAD software. So the workflow here is that you capture your data with the drone, you process it with software. So for example, Hammer Missions is one of the software that we make that allows this to happen. Yep. The idea is that you get your mapping output, and then that will then be delivered to the stakeholder. So if you are a drone service provider, then you would probably provide that to your client. If you are in-house drone team, then there's another team you're probably working with that you would send this data to. And this data, this exported model, as you said very correctly, would then be used as an input into an architect's drawing. So classic example is, let's say if you want to do, you're designing a new it's a new build that you're looking to plan, if you have accurate information for what exists at the moment in a particular site, then you can draw on top of that data, because you're not starting from Google Earth or Google Maps. Basically, you're starting from what is there today, and so that's really powerful for an architect or for an engineer.
It'd be the same with the mill when they do eventually develop it, which they will do. You could take, the data that we've collated for the mill, which you can see on, various posts we've done. You could take the OBJ file of how we've done it, and you could input that in, and they could actually use that model to start to redesign how the mill would look as a residential premises. Yeah,
exactly. Which brings us back to information as power.
It is, and getting ever more powerful as the weeks go on.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the outputs from mapping. What about outputs from inspection? So what do we normally see?
Inspection, I mean, you can create, you can report on the data that you've collated. So you can push forward, I don't know, to create a PDF. Well, we certainly can with ham missions. You can create a PDF report. You can annotate that data. So, you've got broken window, for example, you can annotate the data, say, look, here's a broken window, or here's many broken windows. You can annotate, lots. You can sort by annotation. Here are all the broken windows. You can run a report on that. That report can then go off to your stakeholder. There's so many things you can do.
Because you just want to know what the issue is, where it is on the asset, and you just want to have, I think with the inspection side, one of the things really important is if everyone is inspecting the same building, you want to have a single source of truth in terms of a single window into that building. And if you imagine
a broken window,
I shouldn't have used the word window because that's confusing.
Single broken window into that building.
Yeah, single broken window. So, I mean, if you imagine that you're essentially creating some form of a digital twin of this building by creating a 3D model, and you want to inspect this in a virtual environment. I think the important thing is that all the people that are inspecting this building, because you might have like 1,000 images that you want to inspect and look at everything from every point of view, that all the people are looking at the same building and there are no copies and everything is stored in one place. So all annotations on the images, all markers on the project are all stored in the same place. So you can generate a PDF report from, and what needs to be fixed, and the engineers can probably start thinking about a repair plan of some sort.
It's like construction monitoring, isn't it? You could all monitor the same output, so to speak. Everything's provided in one place. When you're inspecting something, the last thing you want to have is various different people throwing their hat in the ring. And
so construction monitoring is an interesting example. I think that's something that can be classified as both mapping and inspection, depending on what you're trying to do. I guess if you're just making maps every day of the same site, then it's more mapping to see how things are changing on the site. But then if you're trying to something's been already built and you're probably trying to understand how that's changing, how the condition of it is changing over time, something like post-build monitoring, I guess. That's probably more inspection.
I mean, there are a lot of companies out there or a lot of operators anyway, that I know that will go back to a site month on month. So they'll get a kind of progress, which also classes, I guess, as inspection as well, because it gives the stakeholder or client the ability to inspect what is happening to their site over X amount of time.
Especially if they're looking for issues as opposed to just understanding the general overview. Because I think that's kind of the key difference in some sense, where if it's just an overview, or if it's just what is there at the current point in time. Then it's still mapping. But I guess if there are specific issues, whether it's in a building facade or anything else on site, especially if they've identified something and they're trying to sort of understand this condition over time. Does happen with projects, right? Like things don't go according to plan, and now they've got to monitor how something develops over time. If it's,
it does. The wonderful world of construction.
Yeah.
Which luckily I'm not involved in.
Yeah, it's a lot of meticulous planning, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So okay, now that we know what mapping and inspection mean, at least from our perspective, how do we decide when to map versus when to inspect?
Case by case basis.
Right.
I would have thought. I mean, there's there is the obvious. Your client or stakeholder says, well, I want can you go and build me a 3D model of that they're building straight away? But then you've got, they could build you that you can go and build them a 3D model, but what do they want that 3D model for? Do they want it surely just for, oh, look, there's my 3D model? Or do they want to use that 3D model to then inspect? So there is some crossover.
Yeah.
There can be some crossover between the two.
Yeah.
It does depend on a case by case basis.
Yeah.
It all depends what your end user, let's call them end users.
End user is a good word.
Going back to my IT days, you had end users. It depends what your end user wants.
Yeah.
What they want out of it.
Yeah.
They might just want a representation of the area that they want to do a construction site on.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's a very key, important question to ask at the time when someone has either contracted you, or if you're in a team, delegated you the job of kind of capturing this data. Then it's important to ask, what is it going to be used for? Is this going into some CAD software later on, or are we just trying to understand, or is it going to be essentially a PDF report with many rectangles on the image to understand where the issues are? Those questions are really important. And
it can also depend on budget. They might come back to you and say, well, I'd like a 3D representation of this, this street, because we're going to do X, Y, Z to it. Well, what are your costings? I'm not going to go out and 3D map, a street for X amount, when actually the software for me to be able to render your 3D image is going to cost me X. So it can depend on budget as well. Again, that boils down to your client or stakeholder, your end user.
Yeah. So I think that's a very good point around whether you need to process the data or not.
Yeah.
Because let's say if you're doing an inspection, maybe you don't need to process the data. Maybe you just need the images visualized in the right way, and you just need to be able to create these annotations on them. That's going to be a much smaller job in terms of time, versus if you need to process the data, because processing the data itself can take hours more. So, there is the budget of the tools involved, but also the time involved.
Yeah, I mean, certainly inspections in the past that I've done manually, so without any software intervention, apart from obviously the flight software, I've gone up and done photographed a grid pattern of a roof, and then I do one high shot, so they know what the roof looks like, and then I literally give the data over to my client, because that's all they want. But what they might come back and say is, I want all of this photography, but I need a means to be able to annotate it so I can then report on it.
Yeah.
So it kind of all depends, it depends what your end user wants and what their end goal is.
Yeah. And so I think one of the things I find is that in the industry, it was okay to send the data to the end customer, let them make a decision on what they need to do with it. But I think with the way the industry is evolving is that I think that the end user, whether you're in an in-house team or whether you are a drone service provider, the end user sometimes lacks the knowledge in terms of what what they need to do once they have the data. They sometimes
Well,
don't even have the machines to be able to work with the data in the right way. So I think
we're back to educating the end user, aren't we? Which is what we said in the first place, finding out exactly what they want. And if they're unsure of what they want, explain their options.
Yeah.
Give them the options.
Yeah.
Then they may go, oh, actually, I don't want it mapped. I don't want it inspected. I just want it mapped.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know I'm biased, but I think it's really important to think this on behalf of the end user and then use the appropriate software to deliver the data. Because if they don't get the data in the right way, I mean, the days of sending data over USBs is definitely over. And so if they don't get the data the right way, they can't use it. And I think number one rule for our industry is that if the end user doesn't derive value from the drone data, then all the flying, was basically useless, So
which boils down to quality.
Yeah.
Again, quality assured.
Mm-hmm.
You want to, at the end of the day, if you are a drone service provider, you're going to want to repeat business.
Yeah.
And the way to do repeat business is to provide a quality product.
Yeah. Or if you're an in-house team and you're trying to
sales, Varun. I should have been in sales.
You're not?
No. Well, I kind of am, I guess. We are selling our product. Sorry, go on. I interrupted.
No, so I was just saying, if you want repeat business as a drone service provider, obviously you need to be able to have the customer come back to you. But also, I think, I think about the in-house team, if they need to be able to, reducing the cost of the operation involves building efficiency, because for an in-house team, it's all about doing the same thing they would have done with a traditional method, or they would have outsourced it normally. But now if they're doing it themselves, they need to make sure that they are able to do this time and time again.
Yep.
And every time they do it faster, which reduces the costs associated with it. And they increase safety because they're keeping their feet on the floor.
Increase safety, they cut costs, and they, the efficiency goes up. The quicker they can do one job, it means they can move on to the next, but still keep it safe and produce the quality product at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Quality,
cool.
quality.
So what about then quality cameras? Because if you're doing mapping versus inspection, so I think everyone is aware of different drones, and I think the drone platforms have become quite standardized in terms of what people should and should not use, but it's really the camera that produces that.
I mean, it all depends on what you want and your budget.
Mm-hmm.
You may have drone service providers who may be a single sole trader who can't afford to go out and buy an M300 with a P1, because you're talking north of 12 grand.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot of money, and you want your return on investment with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So being, you've got you obviously got your Mavic 2 Enterprises, you've got your Mavic 2 Pros, and then you've got your bigger rigs, your M300s and your M30s, for example. So it all depends really on the quality you want to provide. I mean, we've certainly done some very good quality shots with a 20 megapixel 1-inch sensor on the Mavic 2.
Yeah.
But with that, you'll have to be pretty on top of your target.
Yeah.
Because you've got no zoom capability, you've got the 20 megapixel camera, you've got the 1-inch sensor size. If you were then to go to something like a P1 or even a phase one, if you got big Muller whapping that cash out, you can afford to be at a further distance, therefore increasing safety, but producing a quality shot.
Yeah. Agreed. But I think that, in the context of mapping versus inspection, let's try to define what cameras make sense for what use case. Because I think one of the challenges I find in the industry is that people use the wrong camera for the wrong task.
Yeah.
Because, there's a lot of camera manufacturers are incentivized to sell their camera, right? So there might be a camera manufacturer that's actually produced an inspection camera, but will try to sell it as a mapping camera because people will still buy it. And I think it's important for people to know what camera they should buy based on what use case they're trying to serve. So if let's say you're doing mapping and mapping only most of the time, you don't care about inspection so much, then that should dictate the properties of the camera you buy.
Yeah.
You know,
well, you're looking at fixed focal length. You don't want to zoom. High megapixel. Good sensor size. I mean, as I've said about, sensor size, we've produced some very good imagery with a 20 megapixel 1-inch sensor. But if you were to then swap it out for a P1, P1 on a M300, the quality would vastly improve. Exactly. At the end of the day, I guess it boils down to what is affordable to the drone op or the drone team.
And also based on what we said, the images have to be post-processed into a map, right? So they have to be stitched together, and they need to have the structure of overlapping images between them. So the camera needs to be fast in terms of taking photos.
Yes.
You can't afford to miss photos during the shots, because if you do, then the end quality is not going to be as great. So having a fast shutter interval for the camera, having
mechanical shutter is always a winner.
Global mechanical shutter, so that the image is taken in one shot as opposed to an electronic kind of line by line thing. So I think some of those properties over the long run kind of matter as if you want to produce good outputs. And I know that for the longest time, the Phantom 4 Pro used to be the mapping drone and the mapping.
That was the mapping winner, wasn't it? Everyone would go Phantom 4 Pro. Oh, the Phantom 4 RTK. It's got mechanical as well, isn't it? It's the RTK. So there you go. That was the go-to bit of kit. Which I do believe is now going end of line. Or has gone end of line maybe already. So you'd probably be looking at the M3E now. Or if you've got the big dollar, the P1.
So those are definitely going to take over as mapping cameras. I think P1 already has, because of the larger sensor size, the higher megapixel counts, and just overall higher quality image. But obviously it comes with a larger drone.
Do we know if the P1 is backed by Hasselblad? Because obviously they make the cameras for the Mavics. Or most
I don't believe so. I mean, at least I don't see their brand on the P1.
That'd be interesting to find out.
Could be interesting to find out for sure.
Yes, because I know the Hasselblad on the Mavic 2 was certainly it was a winner with a lot of people. We still use it. It's a great little camera.
So that brings us to inspection cameras, right? So,
so I mean, ideally, you're not trying to create a representation of a structure or an object, so you can have the affordability to be able to zoom in, and you want to be able to zoom in, right? So if you see, you're collecting your data at a distance from the target, you see something that you think that doesn't quite look right. So tiles missing or chimney pot stacks fallen off. You want to be able to zoom in and shoot that asset closer without actually physically moving the drone closer. For whatever reason.
To get all the details. Well, you're going to lose details on the zoom, I suppose, in some sense, but the idea is that you can still capture, you can isolate the area you want to capture in the image.
Well, it depends, doesn't it? Because if you've got a zoom camera that's a mechanical zoom, you're not going to lose quality. The moment because I know obviously with the Z, I think the Z30 has a mechanical zoom to a certain point, and then it goes digital. The digital's part of the zoom, you'll lose quality. But if you've got a mechanical zoom, then you won't lose the quality. It will keep the same.
Exactly. So the Z30 obviously zoom camera been very popular. Obviously the DJI released the H20, H20T cameras. And obviously, like the thermal side of it obviously helps with the inspections as well, because again, you can identify issues not just in the visual spectrum, but also using their heat signature.
Yeah.
So it falls in line very well with the inspection side of it. So yeah, I think, just knowing those properties, I guess, like, okay, I'm buying a thermal camera. It's for inspection, of course, or if I'm buying,
you're not going to go and shoot a feature film with it.
Yeah.
Unless it's Predator, of course.
Yeah.
Then you
there
could.
we go. There
You could
yeah.
make a whole thermal film all about
thermal film. Yeah, that's gonna be interesting. Yeah. So exactly. So I think, knowing what camera you buy and what use case you're trying to serve is really important. So that's pretty much it. So I guess it all boils down to define mapping and inspection. Understand what the stakeholder wants.
At the end of the day, you need to understand what your stakeholder, client, or end user wants to achieve from what you're going to collect.
Yeah.
It's their fault.
Yeah.
It's
their fault. Yeah.
Their fault.
Pass on the blame.
Yeah. Pass the blame over to them. So you need to, you need to find out what they require from you.
Yeah.
And then you can, if they're unaware of the difference between mapping and inspection, it's your job to make them aware of the differences and how those differences work. Yeah. And then the tools and the structure behind that.
Exactly. That's pretty much it.
Is that a good summary?
That is a great summary. That's next time I'm unsure whether I want mapping or inspection, I'll just come to you, Alex. I'll be like, tell me, do I need?
And I'll say, what do you want, Varun? What do you want from me?
What do you want? I want you to define mapping and inspection.
Define mapping and inspection. We'll listen to our podcast or view our podcast on YouTube or your other podcast directories. I knew I'd slip that in somewhere.
Yeah, there we go.
No book title this week though.
No book title. Well, Predator got quite close, so
Predator got a mention. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah,
he did. Or could be a she. You never know. He or she.
Yeah.
They got a mention.
They got a mention. Yeah. It got a mention.
It got a mention.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Cool.
It's been a pleasure catching up, Alex.
It has indeed. Until next time, I bid you farewell. And again, as always, I'm going to say it this week because you stole my thunder last week. I think.
No.
So yeah, obviously we're available on YouTube. If you've got any questions at all, you can contact us on team@hammermissions.com. We also convert this into a podcast weekly, which is available on all your good podcast directories. So whether that be Spotify, Deezer, SoundCloud, whatever, we're available on those too. And yeah, on that note, we're done, I think.
Yeah, we're done. Yeah.
Cool.
Brilliant.
Have a good one.
You too, Alex. I'll catch you in the next episode.
Speak to you later.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers, Varun. Bye.